Hello, welcome to part 4 of The Real Thomas A Edison by A.L. Shands. Now that's deceiving because we're no longer reading about Edison. This is now part 4, and we are on our third story. First story was Edison, the other two are not. Deus Americanus is our next story. We're on page 34. How the Perfect One Became the Living Soul of These States. And it is written by Benjamin de Caceres? I'm not sure. Alright. The noblest activity of man is the creation of myths and gods. Man is a lie-loving animal. He calls it the search for the ideal. Euclid, Newton, Darwin, Einstein, and Edison have no power over his physical life and very little over his practical life. No human being has ever patterned his life on the type of the impersonal, cold, reasoning truth seeker. It is Venus, Apollo, and Hercules, Siegfried, St. George, and St. Patrick, Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, Swedenborg, Hamlet, Huckleberry, Finn, Pollyanna, Caesar, Napoleon, Lincoln, Kit Carson, Byron, Paul Revere, that are defied trying to make a hero out of Eli Whitney. In a schoolboy's mind, if he is reading the life of Daniel Boone, try to make a heroine out of Madame Curie in the mind of the schoolgirl if she is reading the life of Joan of Arc. The elect are not yet cold in the grave when they are lovingly lifted out of their coffins and swaddled in attributes that they never possessed, their least gesture exaggerated to heroic proportions. They are set to suckle at the fat breasts of credulity, and so they rise, trailing their garments of mystic glory into the empty empyreans of the imagination, where they reign as richly festooned prototypes, or rather as generating stud horses and mares of the ideal. Every people must have an archetype of its national consciousness. The Greeks delighted in personifying all the elements of the Greek soul and of life. The moderns are somewhat slower at the beautiful art of deification, although it has gradually accumulated a stock of Alfred the Greats, St. Genevieves, and later quite a litter of Joan of Arcs, Garibaldis, Bismarcks, Cromwells, and other variations of Thor, Prometheus, and Mexitol. America had no national Deus until God decreed the mighty conflict of San Juan Hill. Neither Washington nor Lincoln quite filled the bill. Both are destined to become gods, no doubt, and float around in the skulls of posterity and immaculate prototypes of liberty and equality. They have already passed into the semi-legendary stage, but they both lack the quality of university of cosmical versatility, a physical prowess. Washington and Lincoln were specialists. They were supermen by accident, not by divine intention, as was he who was born unto us like Buddha, amid purple and fine linen, in the Annus Mirabilis 1858, but who chose deliberately the common way, the suffrages and approbation of the lowly. I make no less a claim, which I shall prove for this man than an incarnation. He was Deus Vulgus, the people incarnate, the body, brain, and breath of America made corporal. His evolution from Photos to Pantheon was as clearly ordained as was the assassination of McKinley, which cleared the way for his emergence from military fame to civic glory. There is not an element in the American character that is not found magnified with startling clearness in our Deuce. He is the very lexicon of all our virtues. By our virtues, I mean, of course, our strengths, our root motives, which I have catalogued in The Complete American. For those who have not read the Wonder Book, I will give here a list of these elemental American characteristics, of which Deus Americanus is the supreme human. The passion for the circus, love of good, honest humbug, dialectical righteousness, camp meeting mysticism, Blair, hearth, home, and mother, pragmatic idealism, belief in the divinity of statistics. Our hero, belief in nonagenarian wiseacres, the sentimental reformer, hullabaloo, upward and onward, respectability, you're a liar, otoscopy, chauvinism, keep smiling, or grinning, multiply, 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 aerobatic superficiality, healthy, prolonged, and manly exhibitionism, the masterful courage that first discovers the will of the people and then allows it resolutely to the end, speed, gregariousness, resonant, terse, boy, this is going to be a tough one, ethical, terse, ethico-trundon, ethico-malignant, ethico-detonating phrases like a square deal, predatory interests, malefactors of great wealth. These constitute the very gizzard of the Americans. 39 articles, all ensouled in our Deuce, and much more. The Deus Americanus was not only a mold into which was poured the soul sap of a people, but he was a creator as well. He o'erleaped the mold and gave his people new values, new nebulae for posterity, in which it could sun itself and worship from afar. He was a Hercules of physical strength, a mighty, planet-roving Nimrod, a Columbus of lost rivers and lost lands, a patron of the arts, sciences, and the new spelling, a mighty warrior, a Mazeppa of the Dakotas, a super policeman, a world-feared boxer and fencer, conqueror of the Jungfrau and the Matterhorn, maker of republics, with or without their consent, the constructor of a mighty canal, a naval lord after several sea-goings, the conserver of American womanhood and childhood, the discoverer of Oliver Cromwell and Thomas Hart Benton, a super Linnaeus, a super Audubon, a super Thoreau, the great peacemaker, ambassador at large, to all peoples and to all royal funerals, founder of the Analysts Club, which he convened and prorogued at his pleasure, patron saint of the Boy Scouts and Madonna to the Campfire Girls, founder of the American Lords, Sagamore Hill. He taught his people to fear God and do their part, father of the dry Sunday, big brother to all coal strikers, and above all, the divine Gascon of the strenuous life. Since Adam delved and Eve bit, has any people ever had such a deuce? Take all the dia and semi-dia out of Homer, Asgard, and Nibelheim. Fuse them into a single deuce, and you could not find in him the universality and perfectibility of our Deus Americanus. Every authentic God must have at least one temptation, one Gethsemane, one wrestling match with the devil, one dragon to his credit. The God must, or else he cannot become a god. Our Deus had such a test put on him, and he came out triumphant, having beheaded the foe in 4 words, that dirty little atheist. That Deus Americanus deliberately cast around to find a fiend when which to wrestle, as some doubting Thomases have intimated, I reject, after profound thought and study, as utterly ridiculous. Tom Paine had long been in the minds of all real Americans the arch-fiend and the Antichrist. The Methodists had pictured him with horns and tail and the cloven hoof. Millions of American babies were scared into untimely righteousness with, "If you are not a good little boy, Tom Paine'll get you." He was universally anathema. George Washington turned his back on the devil when he returned from Europe, and so shortly afterward soared to the heaven of the saved. Paine was therefore inexorably listed by fate as one of the great labors of Deus Americanus. This final slaughter of Tom Paine by our Deus was, I believe, the greatest of his labors. Because the conflict was spiritual and was hidden from the public gaze, our God must have reconnoitered the Antichrist of the American Revolution from all angles before he began his attack. Before there issued from his mighty pen the searing and deadly phrase, "that dirty little atheist," our Lohengrin Siegfried found his deepest suspicion realized. The fiend Paine was dirty little and an atheist. More, he found confronting him a poxy, malignant dwarf, who, under the mask of reason, practiced the obscene black mass which he had learned in a French prison, where he had been thrown for trying to overthrow the god of Louis the 14th, and I hate when they use Roman numerals, and Torquemada. The battle was short and decisive. Hallelujah. It's a weird little story, isn't it? Tom Paine is no more. Our little children sleep in peace, and Deus Americanus for reward now sits beside Elohim and watches the writings of Paine the Antichrist, an anti-god in hell. Sursum corda. Deus Americanus was the looking glass of all mythological genius, but much more. If he was Hercules, Nimrod, Lohengrin, Mars, and St. George, he also held in that mighty soul of Confucius a Tartan, a Marco Polo, a Taurus Bulba, a Munchausen, a Wilhelm II. I am large, I contain multitudes. He might have said just as well as did a minor American poet when Deus Americanus never took up, because no doubt he saw in him a rival of the doctrine of the strenuous life. our Deuce would tolerate no rivals. To him alone, and for him alone, the khaki and the sword, the medals and the decorations, the bay and the laurel, what that which did not come from Sagamore Horeb was terrible, scabby, ratty, un-American. A summons was a command. Has any American dared to reject a call to Sagamore Horeb from Deus Americanus? Not even James Hunniker dared to face the wrath of the expunger of Tom Paine and the Attila of San Juan Hill. No godlet could ever become Deus Americanus unless he was impeccably respectable. Respectability and sexual rectitudes are to the American what Bacchic and Venusian bohemianism was to the ancients. Really. So there is no smirch on the earth life of Deus Americanus. He, turn the page, he comes up clean as the whistle of Gabriel. No whisper shadowed him through life. He was made in America, where family life is the cornerstone of the temple. He sprouted from the loins of our most ancient and adamant virtue. Had Tom Paine, the foe, a wife or even children? I never heard of them. I am not an authority on I'm not an authority on demonology. This guy doesn't like Thomas Paine. Ben Franklin might have been Deus Americanus, but he, who incarnated so many of our traits, failed in two characteristics. He had no San Juan Hill, and his Puritanism was tainted with common Latin habits. George Washington ran a still, gambled, and they do say Lincoln told Boeotian stories. They were automatically ruled out, but the Immaculate One was found in the cradle in East 20th Street. Destiny's dice were set. The perfect American, sans peur et sans reproche, was born unto us. Deus Americanus, of course, had his enemies. While he was still in the woof and mesh of the flesh, what God had not his enemies? The strenuous life stimulates the birth of rivals. Deus Americanus was, in fact, always at Armageddon. Every day was Armageddon to him, carrying in his larynx the very voice of the quick and of the dead, his brain weaving ideals for countless unborn Boy Scouts, feeling within his depths the message of the square deal of prosperity, hearing in the cyclopean thump of his fist on thousands of tables the muffled drumbeat of his immorality, uttering through these great carnivorous teeth a defy to the enemies of his people, who, naturally, were the enemies of the Lord of Righteousness. This is getting weird.
I didn't understand that.
Casting out in the fire of his nostrils malefactors of great wealth, no names given. Slaughtering with mighty Isaiah in epithet those who dared disagree with him, battling for the Lord in rain or shine, Yankees with or Yankees lose. It would indeed have been miraculously unique if this mighty killer of the moose and the lion had not had his Lucifer, his Cain, his Brutus. The New York World even went so far as to sue Deus Americanus for libel. as well try to smash an idea with a bamboo walking stick. They have accused him of disloyalty. How undeuce-like such charges seem to us today. We who are molding for prosperity the great legend, a God may be, nay, must be, inconsistent. He is protein, a law unto himself, sublime and impeachable, egotist that he was. Those who could not do a Voltaire face in perfect step with our Deus Americanus were flung to the ambulance corpse. He was true to himself and to his heaven-storming dreams. Little men of earth, you who speak of loyalty, consistency. Boy, this is a rough one. You live in realities, while our Deus was an absolute loyalty, gratitude, consistency, a dog's virtues, a nationalist when he spoke to the Egyptians in Egypt, an imperialist when he addressed Englishmen in England. That was typically American and therefore right. Are fishers of men and votes. Do they not have one doctrine for the white aristocracy of the South, another for the hog and the wheat blocks of the West, another for the mammon-sodden peoples of the East, and still another for the Harlem Ethiopian belt? Consistency, thou art neither an American nor a Deus. Every blasphemy that has been uttered against Deus Americanus has been uttered by Prometheus against Zeus. But Zeus and his heirs still reigns, and the virtues still nibble at the penitent liver of Prometheus. Vultures, sorry. And the vultures still nibble at the penitent liver of Prometheus. The divinity of our Deus was squarely proven in his lifetime. He was bulletproof. Twice was the sign given. Twice did Deus Americanus come forth a greater than Siegfried, who, it will be remembered, had a valuable spot in the back, which worked his undoing. But the king of the Nibelungs of the West, our Deus, although he had bathed in the blood of many dragons of evil, had been a friend of nature since boyhood. And so even the trees held their breath in brotherly awe and stayed the knotty leaf from falling on his back when he raged against the malefactors and atheistic heathens. Soaked in dragon's blood? No, our Deus was soaked in something far greater. He was soaked in American virtues and American ideals. We Americans are baptized in the blood of righteousness, and neither Excalibur nor the host of Tom Paine shall prevail against us. At the height of the Homeric contest on San Juan Hill, when the thunders from the 50-mile-long Spanish artillery were shaking the world, Deus Americanus abandoned his horse, like Napoleon at Lodi, and, pistol in hand, charged with his handful of men into the frightful rain of shells and bullets. The great Spanish army collapsed at the daring, miraculous feat and surrendered. San Juan Hill was the whirling, fiery egg that hatched a Deus. An invaluable incarnation had appeared amongst us. The great legend had begun to gel. Again, many years later, when the voice of Achilles had by its sound alone had shattered the Trojan army, had taken possession of our Deus, the second sign of invulnerability was given. It was in Milwaukee. An unknown man, a descendant or a disciple of the dirty little atheist, no doubt, shot at Deus Americanus, but so completely and miraculously was he panopiled in American home virtues and ideals that he went right on speaking to his audience with most miraculous tongue, unshatterable proof this, and finally that he was our deuce. He had his play moments too, that endeared him to us probably beyond all else, for we are a play people, almost infallible it would seem sometimes. We are the laughing baby eye of the world, and 'twas fit that that element of our national character should appear in Deuce Americanus. He played for us in the White House for many years. What gambols, what clownings, what sentimental pranks he put on for us. How we guffawed, rocked, shook with mirth. So much so that when the Deuce left the White House to retire into the desert like St. Francis of Assisi for meditation and counsel with the lions of the Zambezi, he gave utterance to the most celebrated, not of any abdicating ruler. Well, I've had a corking good time, only a god could indulge in and get away with, as the saying goes. Such a sportive remark about guiding for 8 years the spiritual, moral, and physical destinies of his people. Life is always a comedy to the gods, and what has an Olympian to do except have a corking good time? Alright, and we'll stop there.